First, let's start with this case. My parents separated in the early 1990s after 24 years of marriage and eventually divorced. Despite this, they remained on reasonably good terms. My dad would still visit my mom's family, and my mom continued to be invited to family events on my dad's side. While my mom stayed single, my dad had several partners over the years. About 12 years ago, he met Zara, and they had a great relationship until my dad passed away suddenly 2 years ago. Zara and my dad were not married, did not live together, and did not share finances. My brother and I were listed as his next of kin. When my dad passed, I took primary responsibility for organizing the funeral. The costs for the cremation, cars, officiant, and similar arrangements were covered by my dad's bank account. I paid for the flowers and a reception with a buffet lunch for 75 people. My mom was incredibly supportive throughout the planning, helping my brother and me manage everything. Zara was also fully included in the process. She selected my dad's final outfit, contributed to the eulogy, had the final say on the coffin, chose some of the flowers, and picked one of the 3 songs played during the service. Another song was my choice, and the third was one my dad had always said he wanted. On the day of the funeral, the first car included 6 of us: me, my brother, my mom, Zara, Zara's daughter, and her sister Lucy. We all sat together in the first pew. At the reception, we set up a display table with framed photos and an album. These photos were contributed by Zara, my mom, the wider family, and us. My mom shared with me today that during the reception, she had gone to straighten some of the photos that had been knocked over. Lucy barged her out of the way and told her it wasn't her place to touch the photos. Lucy then said, "I don't know why you're even here anyway. This has nothing to do with you." My mom didn't tell me at the time because she knew I'd have likely asked Lucy to leave, which would have made things difficult for Zara. My cousin's wife later confirmed that she witnessed the interaction. Now that I know, I am absolutely furious with Lucy. My mom had every right to be there. She was paying her respects to her ex-husband, the father of her 2 children, and someone who remained her friend after their divorce. She was there because my brother and I wanted her there, and because my dad would have wanted her there. Even if none of that were true, it still wasn't Lucy's place to say otherwise. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong, but do you really want to do that? It's been 2 years. But if it's something that'll give you peace of mind, write her a note, but only if Lucy was an adult at the time. If she was a teenager, however, Zara would feel the worst because her daughter's actions would probably embarrass her greatly. Gently tell her that you were terribly hurt and disappointed by her cruel words because your parents had always remained friends and nothing more. Be short and direct. Then end it. Do not communicate with her any further than that. Good luck, you're not in the wrong. The question is why you want to tell her. Do you even have to talk to her now? I would simply ignore her. If you have to spend time in the same place as her, just be civil. If anybody wants to know why you're frosty, then you can tell them. Otherwise, why give them the satisfaction? Maybe you are thinking it will make you feel better, but I doubt it will. It's been 2 years. I would let it go because at this point it's been so long that bringing it up isn't going to accomplish anything productive. Lucy quite likely is going to say she didn't do that, didn't remember it, and then you get into a who said what situation and it's just not worth the aggravation. If it were 2 weeks or even 2 months ago, yes. But 2 years? Nope. Next up, last night was our work Christmas party. Yes, it's early, but we got a big discount for booking in November. We had tables at an event space hosting themed Christmas parties. The venue was a beautifully decorated marquee with a covered walkway leading to the coat check and beyond it, the toilets. The restrooms were portable toilet blocks split into halves. One side for men and the other for women, with stalls, sinks, and on the men's side, urinals. The majority of the guests that evening were women, probably 80 to 85% of the approximately 300 attendees. About an hour into the party, while I was in the men's restroom adjusting my shirt stays, which required using a stall every time, I heard a commotion. A loud, intoxicated woman announced she was going to use the men's room, only to retreat immediately after seeing the urinals, exclaiming, "There are urinals!" I shook my head, fixed my shirt, and didn't think much of it. As the evening progressed, the queue for the women's restroom grew longer and longer. My female colleagues were gone for increasingly extended periods with each trip. Each time I visited the men's restroom, there were women using it, but I simply ignored it and used a stall, deciding it wasn't worth fussing over. It was my final trip to the restroom, just before my husband picked me up, that made me question if I'm the bad guy in this situation. By this point, the queue for the women's restroom was sprawling. I scanned the area to check if there was a queue for the men's restroom, but saw none. Assuming it was clear, I skirted around the line of women and stepped toward the men's side of the toilet block. As I approached the entrance, a loud, slurred voice barked behind me, "There's a queue, you know!" Startled, I turned around and scanned the area again. "I don't see a queue for the men's room," I said. Her response, "We are the queue." She leaned forward, and the distinct smell of rum hit me. Confused, I replied, "But this is the men's room." Glaring at me, she snapped, "Well, there aren't enough ladies' toilets, so we're using these too, so you have to wait." She punctuated her words by jabbing a finger at me. At that moment, a woman in a navy sequin dress emerged from a stall behind me, and I'd had enough. "No, I don't have to wait because there aren't any men queuing for the men's toilets," I said firmly. I marched into the now vacant stall, attempting to slam the door behind me, but the lightweight construction caused it to glide closed instead. Am I wrong for insisting I had the right to use the men's restroom without waiting in the women's line? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. There wasn't a queue for the men's toilets. And if it was reversed, women would be losing their mind if a load of guys were just using the women's toilets. The people who are at fault here, and at pretty much every other event I have ever been to, are the organizers. It's a well-known fact that women have to queue for ridiculous amounts of time to go to the bathroom, even though we have physiologically smaller bladders and therefore need to relieve ourselves more often. Providing more women's bathrooms, or creating unisex bathrooms, would be a fairer approach. No judgment here. You're not in the wrong. If the toilets had been marked family or unisex, then the line would have been for all the bathrooms, but they weren't. Also, you didn't get mad at the woman using the stall that caused you just enough wait to end up in conversation with the angry woman. You just took the first available men's stall when it became available and didn't mind someone else using the stall when it was free prior to your arrival. There are posts about folks doing that in the case of handicap or diaper-changing table stalls. And last, I love you just a little for admitting that you tried to slam the door, but that was a fail. You're not in the wrong. I don't care if women use men's toilets when there's an imbalance, and really just make them all single occupancy around a common hand-washing area, and off you go. But you're not an idiot for being priority for your own facilities either. Next up, last year I bought an eMove Cruiser electric scooter for $1,500, and with modifications to increase speed and performance, it now costs over $2,000. I use it frequently to commute to work. I have a sister, 43-year-old female, and a nephew, 13-year-old male, who often houses it for me while I'm away on business trips. They take care of my pets and plants, and they enjoy the change of scenery. My nephew has always been interested in my scooter, but I've repeatedly told him it's not for kids due to its speed and danger. Both he and my sister are well aware that he's forbidden from riding it. Last month, while I was away for a week, my nephew took my scooter out, left it unattended, and it was stolen. When I got back, my sister told me what happened, admitting that I'd be angry. I was furious and immediately asked them to leave my house. I told them they'd need to replace the scooter. My sister pleaded with me, saying they couldn't afford it and suggesting my nephew do chores around my house to make up for it. I told her that I wouldn't replace my scooter. She then admitted the money would have to come out of their vacation fund, to which I replied, "Tough luck." Our parents got involved, saying I was being too harsh. They agreed my nephew should be punished and that I deserved to be reimbursed, but argued that taking away their family vacation was cruel and petty. They suggested a payment plan, but I refused, insisting I needed the scooter replaced immediately since I use it for commuting. I also pointed out how dangerous the scooter is, and that my nephew was repeatedly warned not to touch it. After calming down, I've started to wonder if I'm being unreasonable. I'm still angry but want to find a fair resolution. Edit. My sister and nephew view house sitting as a mini vacation. I've offered to pay them for it, but they always refuse. Instead, I give them free run of the house and money for meals. I had insurance on the scooter, but my sister didn't file a police report because she mistakenly believed the police wouldn't accept it since it wasn't a car. I won't be filing a police report against my nephew. I'm furious, but I don't want him to have a record or get into legal trouble over this. I'm now considering accepting a payment plan, but will likely insist on interest. For me, it's less about the money and more about the principle. My nephew needs to learn a serious lesson about responsibility. Let's start judging. She said that any money would have to come from their vacation fund. If replacing the scooter meant they'd have to use money reserved for basic necessities, rent or mortgage, food/utilities, then I'd say you may want to reconsider the payment plan option. But if they're upset because they can't take a vacation this year because of this, then tough nonsense. You're not in the wrong. You're not in the wrong. Repaying you comes before a vacation. You need it to commute to work. Their neglect caused it to be stolen, so they need to face the consequences, especially since it was expressly forbidden that he ride it. You're not in the wrong. This is 100% your sister's fault. She's responsible. This is an expensive enough item to expect repayment, not to mention it is your way to commute to work. First of all, if God forbid, your cousin had been injured, killed himself, or caused an accident on the road, you could be sued, and people could have gotten hurt. This is a very serious breach of your trust and should be treated as such. Your sister knew her son was desperate to ride the scooter, and she did nothing to assure that he would leave it alone. He didn't take the scooter and leave it unattended. The kid straight up stole the scooter and got it stolen. If he left it unattended, it is reasonable to assume he used the scooter multiple times. Kids who are sneaking a vehicle of any kind are usually not wanting to get caught, so they put it back after using it. Getting distracted and leaving a scooter lying somewhere around tells me that it wasn't a one-off, and possibly that Mommy knew. They have the money to replace it. The fact that they want to go on vacation with said funds, instead of replacing your commute scooter immediately, is not your problem. Your nephew is the one responsible for them not having the money to go have fun. Your parents agree that your nephew should be punished. Was a swift punishment not issued by Mommy immediately? If so, what? Like no TV for 10 minutes? Good. Tell them that his punishment should be him, not your sister, doing chores for his mother so she can pay back the vacation money. Additionally, he can mow lawns, wash cars, etc. for neighbors to help her pay you back. As if this kid should be rewarded with a vacation after pulling such a dangerous and costly stunt anyway. If he had stolen a neighbor's scooter used for commuting and got it stolen, would your sister beg them to let her do chores? Actions have consequences. This child messed around and should find out what it means to lose privileges like a costly vacation. In my opinion, your nephew also should take responsibility by writing you a letter of apology, outlining how risky and inconsiderate he was with his actions. You are not being unreasonably demanding, and it is not you who is punishing everyone else. In fact, it is ridiculous. They are trying to guilt you into letting this slide, like you are in some way responsible for any of this. Do not agree to a payment plan. This is opening yourself up to a host of future problems. Let your parents fund the vacation of their daughter's family, if it's so important for their precious baby and grandson to have one. You're not in the wrong. Hold your ground. Next up, I, 28-year-old female, am not engaged but have been fielding many questions from family and friends about when I'll get married and have kids. I'm in a long-term relationship with a man, 28-year-old male. I deeply love and hope to marry someday, but our timeline is ours alone. Still, I've given some thought to how I'd like our future wedding to look. During a visit to my father's house yesterday, he, 50 mem, asked who would hypothetically walk me down the aisle. This is the only fatherly thing he has ever shown interest in doing since I was a child. While he was physically present during his every other weekend visits, my parents divorced when I was 3, he was never an involved parent. During those weekends, I was often left to fend for myself or care for my younger siblings for hours while he and my stepmother were out. I became a de facto third parent and live-in maid during those visits. By contrast, my stepdad, 61, has been an active and engaged part of my life since I was 5. He attended every school event, offered guidance and encouragement, and instilled good values in me, everything my biological father never did. We are incredibly close, and he feels like the parent who truly raised me. If decisions came without consequences, I would have my stepdad walk me down the aisle, as he is the one who behaved as a parent should. However, to maintain peace with my father's side of the family, I decided they would share the role of giving me away. My father did not take this well. He complained throughout the rest of my visit, saying he didn't like to share and suggested I find another way to honor my stepdad, though he had no real alternatives to offer. My uncle also chimed in, lecturing me about tradition and how the role should be reserved solely for the father of the bride. Frustrated, I left the gathering early, prepared to tell my father that it would be both of them or neither if he continued acting childish about a role he only seems to care about when others are watching. Additional context. My youngest brother, half-sibling on my father's side, has an intellectual disability and several medical conditions that will require lifelong care. I have expressed to my father and stepmother my desire to become his legal guardian when they can no longer care for him. However, I worry that upsetting my father, for example, by choosing only my stepdad to walk me down the aisle, might lead them to retaliate by naming someone else as my brother's future guardian. In this case, I would have my older brother, half-sibling on my mom's side, walk me down the aisle instead. My stepdad understands the situation and wouldn't be offended by this decision, knowing my priority is avoiding conflict and protecting my youngest brother. Would I be the idiot for sticking to my decision to include both fathers, or finding a peaceful alternative if my biological father refuses to compromise? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Why either or both? If your bio father has a problem with it, have your real father walk you down the aisle. And tough rocks for anyone who doesn't approve. You're a bigger person than I to include your bio father at all, but you have your reasons. It seems to me that your stepdad is your real dad. Your biological father seems entitled and self-absorbed. Apparently, he thinks you are supposed to live up to his expectations. When does this end? As a father of 2 daughters myself, it strikes me as extremely inappropriate to question their choices in relationships, careers, life choices, whatever. Ohm gets 2024. Your uncle has the gall to talk about tradition? Let's talk about the tradition that a parent is involved in a child's life, the way your stepdad was. Yes, your stepdad is, for all intents and purposes, your real dad. Your real dad is just your bio dad, that's all. Your bio dad doesn't deserve to walk you down the aisle because he let you down as a parent. Also, giving you away, in the strict traditional sense, is of course not applicable since you're living together and have your own home. The tradition is based on girls marrying from home and without ever having cohabited with their soon-to-be spouse. These criteria don't apply. In your case, it's less of a tradition than a way of recognizing the person that means a lot in your life.